Before I moved here, I used to do a lot of gardening. I worked with a few people on a garden, and we had a big garden and a lot of space. We could pretty much plant whatever we wanted to plant, because as long as you took the responsibility to clear the space and take care of it. Um, and so deciding on what to plant and such, a lot of it was like, well, we know certain plants because we eat them. So we plant some carrots and some beets and broccoli and kale and whatever we thought we could grow in the climate. And look through the seed catalogs, I'm looking for which peppers I want. And I see some, oh, there's a melon that'll grow in my area, so then I aspire to grow that and get the seeds. But I had a lot of friends that had gardens besides our garden that were much better gardeners than me by far. And I would get a chance to go and see their gardens. And sometimes I would see something in their garden and I would say, oh, that's really beautiful. It might be a plant that I didn't know we could grow in that zone. And they were like, oh, yeah, we can. And so then I realized that I could grow that plant. Or I would see a plant I didn't even know about and left beautiful flower or something. And then I would aspire to grow that. And we have a lot of agricultural analogies in the Dharma. Um, but I want to talk about aspiration a bit. And so, some when we want the aspiration specifically to cultivate our virtuous qualities, not just any aspiration. And so I'm going to go back to the plant thing a little bit. I would get, if I had an aspiration to grow a certain plant, it wouldn't just grow because I had an aspiration. I would have to acquire seed. And with the virtuous qualities, luckily we have the seeds of these. Yeah, which reminds me that where I lived, we had a plum grove. It was an old plum grove that was there from the old homesteaders, I believe. And there were irises growing up under it. But they didn't get enough shade, water, or weeded or anything. And so they were just the leaves of the irises. And occasionally one of the gardeners there, Pete, would dig one up, or a few up, and he'd go and put them in the garden and give them the proper conditions, and they would bloom. And we wouldn't know what it was until it bloomed. And it would be like, wow, that is, there was these ones that had the colors of tigers, like brown and yellow. And it was just, but they were just these things under the plum trees, and they were this big, and we didn't know what they were until he really tended them. But the with the aspiration to cultivate virtuous qualities, we can gain this aspiration a lot of ways. We can read about these qualities in books and stuff and have some idea what they are. We can hear about them, but I think the main way that we really can know about virtuous qualities is to see them modeled. We have to study about them and learn what they are for sure, but to see them modeled by our teachers, fellow practitioners, and a lot of these qualities are not just qualities that are modeled by Buddhists. I've known many Christians are very generous, have good ethical conduct, and are kind, and I've been inspired by that. You can read about and hear about generosity all day, but when you witness somebody giving to someone or you're the recipient, it can be very moving on a much deeper level. And so I think about how aspiration and enthusiasm, when I would get some seeds from a friend or from a catalog, and I would be growing them, and they would come up, and this was usually a group venture, so there was a few of us going, oh, did you see it's up? And we were enthusiastic about it. It's actually growing, And that's another way that we can have, that's one way we can have enthusiasm about our own qualities, is to recognize them and to rejoice in them. And I think about how with the teachings from the Buddha, these teachings to help us understand and cultivate virtuous qualities have been passed on from person to person, student to teacher to student for 2,600 years. And a lot, as I said, a lot of those qualities are, and the qualities that sentient beings have that we don't necessarily always cultivate, but other people besides Buddhists cultivate them. And so I'm sure that the Buddha had been around people who had kindness and such too, and um, had um, inspired him to want to perfect those qualities. We can we can have these qualities and a strong aspiration to cultivate them more and more, and then we have to look at the obstacles to them. When we have a garden, we have to pull the weeds and make the conducive situations for these plants to grow. Um, we have to work on our non-virtuous qualities. And several times during the Friday night teachings, Geshe-la has mentioned that these negative qualities and these virtuous qualities are kind of a reverse proportion. As you work on getting rid of anger, and your patience is going to be better. But if you work on developing patience, that's the antidote to anger. And so these things, as one is diminished, the other grows. And so we really have to realize that we have the seeds to all these good qualities within us, and to really look at the things that are in the way of them flourishing. And ultimately it boils down to the self-centered thought. If I was able to get rid of the self-centered thought, my virtuous qualities would flourish. And if I don't, they won't. It's simple. I mean, that might be simplistic, but it's a good way to look at it. And so I really think about how aspiration is based on a knowledge of the things we want to cultivate. And part of that knowledge comes from seeing those qualities. And then when we see those qualities, we can be inspired in a way that promotes enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm that leads to the effort. That is the joyous effort, the effort of joy. And then we put in the effort, and for a long time, but it will pay off. We think about, we hear about this path is going to take 3 countless great eons, and and it's not just 3 eons, or they don't say 3 long eons. They come up with this term countless, and our enthusiasm goes, ooh, it seems like a long time. But all we have to do is practice now. When I'm walking somewhere, all I have to do is take that one step and then the next step. And so we don't really have to worry about all the things we have to be able to do when we're on the 5th level, a 5th level bodhisattva or something. We just have to be concerned with practicing consistently today, trying to maintain enthusiasm and aspiration for the path we're on, and just be consistent and looking at our examples. We have good examples living here. We have our teachers. We have stories and writings from their teachers, and we have other elders here that model good behavior and fellow practitioners. And if people are listening online, um, it's good if you're studying and such, but you need to be around other practitioners. I had an interest in Buddhism for decades, and without being around other practitioners, I really didn't know what to study, and I didn't really, it wasn't going to come together. I needed to be around people that inspired me and had and have good direction. So this is kind of not the best directed talk because I didn't have any notes and I figured this out in the car on the way home from the dentist. But but just to recognize and appreciate the good qualities in the people we're around, and to think about what it would be like in a society without those can really also, so we have the looking at the advantages of cultivating and the disadvantages of not cultivating. And we can see that in ourselves. And to really just be inspired by others and by our own progress that we've made to keep practicing.